So this story, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This story, credit card balances spiked to $841 billion after stimulus checks help reduce debt. First of all, before I even get into the story, I'd like to direct your attention back to 2006. I was a student in college, and the first time that I had heard this term stimulus was when George W. Bush proposed sending out stimulus checks to just about everybody, which were back then amounting to about $600 per taxpayer. Now, some people did get those stimulus checks, and they were less than $600 because I think their tax withholding took some of the money out of the check. But for the most part, I think most of the people who got those checks, it was about $600. Now, during the last round of stimulus, which we experienced during COVID, people got stimulus checks. The amounts I honestly don't know off the top of my head, but I do remember that it was related to how many children I think you had. I do remember that the cutoff point for a stimulus check was if you were a single person earning more than, I think it was $93,000 a year, you weren't getting anything. And if you were a couple making more than $180,000 a year, you weren't getting anything. So the stimulus began under, the first time I had seen stimulus was under George W. Bush, but the stimulus checks started going out under then President Donald Trump, and those stimulus checks were continued by now current President Joe Biden, who will probably only be president up until November 2024, and then he's gone. Now, I'm pretty sure that the Democrats will probably like to say that it's probably because of his age and his health, but we all know it's because his economy has been a complete disaster, and he's looking like Jimmy Carter Part 2. So that goes without saying. Key points. Consumers pulled off a staggering feat during the pandemic, paying down credit card debt and boosting savings. Now, credit card debt is back to record levels amid the highest inflation in 40 years. The Federal Reserve's monthly credit report found that revolving credit, which mostly includes credit card balances, jumped nearly 20% in April. Now, I've told y'all, if y'all want to build your credit, first of all, you've got to have high credit availability, which means that you want to get your available credit, the number of credit cards you have, or the total amount of credit that you have access to, above $30,000. Ideally, you'd like to have $50,000 worth of available credit. However, that could mean that you're going to have multiple cards that you don't really use, which puts you in danger of having accounts closed. And if an account closes, then that's going to hurt your overall credit availability. So it's a balancing act that's not very easy to accomplish. I myself have about 5 credit cards, I think, off the top of my head, and each one has about a $10,000 balance, in between $10,000 and $13,000. And I maintain $0 balances on those cards. I spend on my credit card every single day. I pay for gas, food, lunch, whatever it is, groceries, whatever it is. And then at night, I pay that bill off. I don't wait till the end of the month. I pay it immediately. When you do that and you show the bank that you're using your credit card as a tool and that all you're doing is spending on it and paying it off, that causes your credit score to increase in ways that you couldn't even imagine. But I'm proof of that because I have an 850 and I've maintained that 850 for, the last 2 years. So anyway, for many Americans, the pandemic-induced slowdown offered a rare opportunity to better their financial standing. I really don't think that's true. A lot of y'all were in danger of losing your jobs under this thing called the Great Resignation and this, that, and other. And a lot of people who had businesses were forced to go deeper into debt because some people had to take out loans just to stay afloat. Some people, at home weren't getting paid. The government was putting out checks basically to keep people in line. It was to keep us from, trying to kill each other over a loaf of bread for the most part. But as you can see, that pretty much didn't work that well because crime is, escalating. Okay, so anyway, government stimulus checks and fewer opportunities for spending drove the personal savings rate to a level not seen since World War II. So let's understand what they mean. Fewer opportunities for spending. What they're basically saying is you were sitting at home, you're getting these stimulus checks, but you're sitting at home and you're doing nothing. There's no traveling, so you can't go anywhere. You can't spend the money on travel. There's nothing to buy because the stores are closed. So for the most part, you're just staying home and you're, just waiting it out. Some of you took your money and you gambled it in the stock market on these stupid short squeezes from Reddit, AMC, and GameStop, and you lost that money. Some of you took that money and gambled it in cryptocurrency. Oh, you knew I was going to say something about cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is under $30,000 again right now as I'm making this video. XRP has still gone nowhere. Dogecoin is still gone nowhere. Shiba Inu is still gone nowhere. Cardano is still gone nowhere, so forth and so on. Primarily, their credit card balances, which have the highest interest rates, averaging more than 16%. Now, I avoid paying interest by paying down my debts to zero. I don't pay interest on my credit cards. The only thing I get out of my credit cards is points, travel reward points, and cash back from my Apple Card. Altogether, consumers paid off a record $83 billion in credit card debt during the pandemic, but the recent spike in prices for gas, groceries, and housing, among other necessities, is causing people to return to running up high balances on their credit card. Now, this is where I can't blame you. If you're using your credit card to purchase your gas and your groceries, I really can't blame you for doing that. All I can say is I hope that you are paying down those balances as soon as possible. But the sad thing is, if you also currently have student loans, then that makes it much more difficult because now you have more payments going in more different directions and you're being faced with higher costs of energy, whether it's food or gas or fuel to keep your house warm. Now, fortunately for you right now, it's summer. Come winter, God knows where oil prices are going to be. We just don't know. They're expecting that oil may increase right now from $120 a barrel to $150 a barrel. And if that happens, we have no idea how bad it's going to look. Because the bottom line is when you get handed a home heating oil bill for $1,000 for 250 gallons, or if you get handed a key span or a gas bill for your house, it's a lot higher than your gas tank for your car. But it's like we're in a situation right now where we just don't know what's going to happen. And this winter, things are expected to be bad, especially considering we have no idea when the Russia curb stomping of Ukraine is going to end. Because I was really thinking about this. What's happening in Russia is not really a war. This isn't a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a curb stomp battle between Russia and Ukraine. Russia is curb stomping Ukraine. This is not a war. A war is something that happens between two evenly matched opponents. This is not a war. This is a curb stomp. Russia is curb stomping Ukraine. So from now on, I'm going to stop saying that this is a Russia-Ukraine war. This is a Russia-Ukraine curb stomp. Okay. Altogether, these consumers paid off $8.3 billion. Now, it shows you the household debt compared to income. Now, I'm going to be really quick about this. In 2008, what ended up happening was the banks basically seized credit card lending for a while. And back then, it was very difficult to get a credit card because of the financial crisis, or they call it the financial crisis. And one thing I remember distinctly was that pretty much caused me to start using my debit card among all else. And back then, debit cards actually had rewards points on them. Unfortunately, when the banks realized that people actually started saving money and people started abstaining from using credit cards and people were starting to build up cash back points, what the banks did was they immediately canceled debit card points and they left points only on your credit card. So your debit card basically became useless because the reality is it's stupid to spend money right out of your bank account. It's actually better to spend it on a credit card, get something for spending it, 1%, 2%, 3% cash back, and then to repay it immediately using money in the bank. So it's like the banks are smarter than we are, and the banks can see things long term in ways that we can't. But for the most part, that's what I specifically remember happening. The Federal Reserve's monthly credit report found that revolving credit, which mostly includes credit card balances, jumped nearly 20% in April from the previous month to 1.103 trillion, breaking the pre-pandemic record of 1.1 trillion. Meanwhile, credit card balances are also up year over year, reaching 841 billion in the first 3 months of 2022 and are expected to keep heading higher, according to a separate report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The rising credit card borrowing, together with auto loans, student debt, and mortgages, has now propelled total household debt to a record 15.84 trillion. Now, I feel very vindicated because when they talk about this total household debt, I can honestly say that I'm not part of it. I don't have the student debt, mortgage was paid off, and I keep my credit card balances at zero. So I can honestly say that I feel good about that. You know, I've been doing the right thing, and that's the reason why I have an 850 credit score. So it says a big drop and then a big rise. We got our new record. It took just 11 months for revolving debt to bottom out and then 15 months from there to climb back to a new high, said Ted Rossman, some nobody as far as I'm concerned. Following the financial crisis, it took nearly 10 years from peak to peak, Rossman said. This has definitely been a V-shaped curve, a big drop and then a big rise. But it's not all bad news, he added. Some of this reflects rising consumer spending, which is good for the economy. Here's the problem. That's not true. The average economist doesn't think about the whys. They're just looking at numbers. They're just looking at graphs. People are spending right now way more money than they want to spend on food and energy, specifically for their house or for their vehicle, just to get back and forth to work. The energy costs are making it so that even if you wanted to save money, you can't. Watching your gas prices go from $2 to $6, literally tripling. And I'm just thinking about premium unleaded. I'm not talking about regular unleaded. Regular unleaded was like $1.25 during COVID. And a lot of people ran out and bought cars during COVID with those stimulus checks. And then they sat back and watched over the last 3 years, since 2020? Well, okay, since 2019, they've literally watched gas prices go from like 1 and multiply 3 times for the most part. They've watched gas go even higher than that if you're talking about diesel. Diesel fuel has more than tripled. So I don't know what to say. It says, but the downside for consumers is that credit cards are one of the most expensive ways to borrow money. So the bottom line is, as I've tried to teach, the only way to win with credit cards is to repay the balance nightly. I don't wait till the end of the month. I pay it every single night. As soon as the balance posts, I'm paying it off. As soon as it posts, I'm paying it off. As I did a story yesterday, Apple Pay Later is now muscling its way into the buy now, pay later platforms. Other buy now, pay laters include PayPal, Affirm, and Square. They have their own service. Buy now, pay later, in many cases, is worse than credit cards. But again, people are spending more money, not just because they want to, but because they're forced to. Energy costs are outstripping everything else. That's bad news because these energy costs are an unnecessary tax on the people. The same goes for inflation itself. Inflation is an unnecessary tax that you're forced to pay because the government's out there printing money. And that's the reality. Instead of raising your taxes on you directly, The government is causing an inadvertent raise of taxes by printing money, and it's unapportioned tax, which is basically unconstitutional. But they've got you in a situation where there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the state of the union right now. So credit card balances are going way back up. People are being forced. I buy on my credit card $115 of gas. That's what it takes to fill my tank right now. Now, God knows what gas is going to be when I go back there, because I don't even know. They've done everything they could to try to make gas prices go down, and they failed. They were dipping into the strategic oil reserve. They cut the New York State gas tax from 48 cents till December 31st, which means that we are going to have a $600 million deficit. So I don't even know what to say anymore. I just don't know what to say anymore. And meanwhile, as you can see by the top of this page, the Democrats are busy having hearings about January 6th. So let me get this straight. The American people are getting their asses whipped by gas prices, by shortage of baby formula, not being able to feed their baby, energy prices going up in general. On top of that, the price of everything is going up because of inflation. On top of that, they're facing economic uncertainty because they're losing their jobs or getting laid off. And you mean to tell me that these goddamn Democrats, the best that they can do is to try to focus your attention on January 6th? So let's see. January 6th insurrection is now part of the list of the things that they're doing to distract you. So for one thing, what I've noticed is every single shooting that happens, no matter where it is, anything that involves any gun whatsoever, is now front page news. What I've noticed is that the government at this point has stopped talking about Russia versus Ukraine. If you're looking at Yahoo, Google, or any of these American media propaganda systems that are all working together, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, what you'll notice is the only thing they talk about is how well Ukraine's doing. Now, Ukraine's getting its ass whipped. Let's just understand that right now. But what they've done is they're trying to turn your attention away from that by not talking about it unless Ukraine suddenly does something that they can get on camera that they can talk about. Ukraine's getting curb stomped. That's what's happening. But they're busy talking about if the Ukrainians shoot down a helicopter, oh yeah, woo, we won, we got it. But the problem is the very next day, Putin's taking something over. You know, it's so sad. I never imagined when I was a kid that America would be this fucked up by the time I was 40. When I thought back, when I was a kid, I thought by now, I thought like this country, I swear to God, I thought we'd have flying cars because that's what they told us. I thought we'd be flying like the Jetsons and shit. I thought like everything would be going great. And I was like, yeah, this doesn't look good at all. It just doesn't look good. So that's what you're looking at. So I just talked a little while ago about the housing crisis not being an actual crisis, but being much, much worse, a crisis and everything else. And now I'm talking about the credit card crisis. So that's what it is. The only thing you can do if you're not in debt is to do your best to stay out of debt. That's the best thing you can do. Right now, people are buying a lot on deferred payment. And the best thing you can do is try to avoid that as much as you can. Spending on credit, there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're paying it off immediately. But a lot of you don't have that discipline. So what I've been trying to do is get you to have that discipline. I've been telling you about it. I've been trying to coach you through it. But you've got to have that discipline at the end of the day.